Welcome to session 2 of the Empowered Mindset Virtual Retreat. We'll start with a movement practice. Scan the QR code or visit the website for this chair yoga practice focused on hips and spine. Pause the webinar and let's move. Welcome back and thank you for practicing with me. In this session, we'll discuss the first 3 pillars of an empowered mindset. These pillars are about doing the inner work needed to continue building resilience, confidence, and learn to internalize empowerment so that when we're interacting with the world around us, we're doing so feeling secure in who we are. The first pillar is the foundational pillar. It's the one that allows us to feel confident in practicing the following 6. Pillar 1 is know your intrinsic value and worth. There is nothing you have to do or be in order to be valuable. In the context of our professional spaces, this can seem like a foreign concept, especially when you hear things like, how are you adding value to X, Y, Z? Often, we are taught that our value is tied to our tasks or our intelligence or how materially successful we are. A fixed mindset tells us that our value and worth are conditional. Our identity is tied to what we do or what we have or what position we hold. This way of identifying can keep us in a loop of constantly trying to prove our value and worth, which can lead to burnout. In the spring of 2024, I was forced to resign from a leadership program. During the program, I had expressed some opinions and thoughts that apparently made people uncomfortable, though no one expressed this directly to me. In this program, we were split into small groups to work on a community project. When I expressed my feelings about the program in a text to my small group, someone from that group shared the text with leadership who decided that my text was unprofessional. It was on a call with 2 people who were leaders of the organization that put this leadership program on, one of whom I had never met prior to the call, that they gave me 2 options. You can resign, or we can remove you. I quickly realized that the style of leadership they were peddling was more about assimilation than openness to new ideas. It was more about obedience to one way of thinking than diverse collaboration. And it was more about accolades than genuine care and concern for people. It was a hard lesson, but a necessary one because it showed me who I was as a leader and that I am a leader who is not afraid to be vulnerable, to speak up, and to show up with genuine care for our community. The downside is that there remained a part of me that felt I had to prove my worth. I took on roles in other areas of the community. I sponsored events, participated in events, continued doing more and more networking, taking on more and more tasks and responsibilities, essentially overcommitting myself in order to say, hey, I am a good leader. Look at everything I'm doing to prove it. This is, of course, unhealthy, but in times of high stress, it can be difficult to see things clearly. I developed the 7 pillars of an empowered mindset based on both this experience and my experience with emotional abuse, recognizing in both cases that when we attach our sense of value to external validation, we become vulnerable to toxic environments, environments that deplete our energy, that demand perfection, and that break our spirit and sense of worth. When we accept that there is nothing we have to do in order to maintain our value, we give ourselves the freedom to rest. I'm not only valuable when I'm working, but I'm also valuable when I'm sleeping and when I'm enjoying a movie or taking a vacation or connecting with friends or just sitting, staring out the window, watching birds. When we accept our value as a given, we free ourselves from having to prove ourselves to others. I got burnt out trying to prove myself, which actually made me less effective as a leader because I couldn't do everything well. Knowing one's intrinsic value and worth also frees us from taking on shame related to errors in judgment or mistakes we make when doing a task, while also encouraging us to take accountability for those errors. Instead of identifying with our failures, we mindfully observe. We quickly forgive ourselves while accepting whatever the consequences, offering ourselves both self-compassion and keeping ourselves accountable. And we lean toward gratitude, perhaps for what we learned as a result of our error. And remember, mindfulness can help us manage stress and regulate our emotions. And gratitude releases dopamine and serotonin, mood-boosting chemicals in the brain. The combination of self-compassion and accountability can help build our resilience, protecting us from shame while building up our tolerance for feedback and input that may be uncomfortable, but does not diminish our value. When we're able to self-validate, we're better able to set boundaries. One reason setting boundaries can be difficult comes back to the desire for external validation. When we want someone to like us or want to show that we're a team player or are afraid of hurting people's feelings, we might fail to keep boundaries that would protect us from burnout, empathy fatigue, or other physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual harm. I encourage you to check out a 5-minute video where Brené Brown, an author, professor, and podcaster who studies vulnerability and shame, talks about boundaries as a key to compassionate living. You can click on the QR code or visit the website to connect to that video. Pause the webinar here and check the video out. Welcome back. Some things you can do to start thinking about how to begin setting boundaries is to take note of what you observe when you're in different environments or spending time with different individuals or groups. Get into a practice of checking in with your physical space, mental space, emotional space. One thing I've learned observing my level of energy when networking is that, with some exceptions, I have about a 90-minute window where I can be fully engaged. As an introvert, I get more energy from being in quieter, more contemplative spaces where I'm either alone or with very few people. Observing our own energy in spaces further develops our self awareness and can guide what kind of boundaries we must set in certain spaces or with certain people in order to maintain or enhance our sense of well being. Pillar 3 is values alignment. Establishing our values and learning to align our actions with our values goes hand in hand, both with knowing our intrinsic value and worth and setting boundaries. When considering your values, also consider your influences and your actions. Values can be a guiding force for our behaviors, actions, and where and with whom we spend our time. For example, before I knew anything about the importance of establishing a set of values, and when my husband and I were living paycheck to paycheck, more or less in survival mode, I was not very engaged in the larger community. I worked, did some activities with my husband and a few friends, but in terms of getting involved in volunteering or seeking networking opportunities, these things were just not important to me. Now that I own my own business, have opened myself up to connecting with more people in the community, and I'm not overly stressed about putting food on the table or keeping a roof over my head, I am better able to be a support and use my time and resources for more than just satisfying my own needs. Our values can shift. One of my core values used to be social connection. I have since updated it to high quality social connection. This doesn't mean I am not open to connecting with all kinds of people. However, I prefer to spend more time and energy with those who are genuine, kind, oriented toward growth and development, and are doing their best to use whatever privilege they have for the good of their communities. I used to have luxury as part of my 5 core values because I enjoy wine and the occasional cigar. But as I began to see more and more the need in our community for deeper engagement, I replaced luxury with community engagement. I determined that if it came down to it, I would rather build up my community than have access to these little luxuries. I still do enjoy my wine and occasional cigar, and these luxuries are sometimes a part of community engagement. I spent time chatting about films, filmmaking, and film festivals with a few people at a cigar bar recently. And a women's networking group I serve on the board for recently had a cocktail connections event at a wine bar. When we establish our values, we do so with an understanding that based on the different seasons in our life, our unique circumstances, and our changing perspectives, these values can shift and change. I encourage you to take a moment to write down 3 to 5 things you value. Here is a small list to help you get started. Consider these 4 main areas of your world: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Note what you feel genuinely drawn to as a value versus what you've heard others say you should value. Our values ought not to feel obligatory. These are things we truly care about based on our actions or things we care about that we want to establish to help guide our actions. Pause here and take about 2 to 3 minutes to decide and then write down your list of values. let's keep that journaling momentum going. One practice we can do to practice internalizing our value and worth is I am affirmations. You can write or say out loud to yourself, I am enough. I am worthy. I am valuable. I am free. I am bold. I am powerful. And whatever other positively affirming I am statements you can think of. Another practice, one that encourages self-compassion, is to bring to mind some error or mistake you've made and use this prompt as part of your journaling session. Even when, name the error, my existence is valuable. Or even if, name a mistake or shortcoming or limitation, I am worthy. Again, we're still taking accountability for those errors, but we are not attaching our entire identity to a mistake. Spend about 2 to 3 minutes journaling on those I am affirmations or those intrinsic value and worth prompts. You can pause the webinar here. Next, let's journal about boundaries. Jot down one area in your life where you can start establishing boundaries. This could be boundaries with yourself as a self-discipline practice. For example, you might notice that you have no boundaries around the amount of time that you're on your phone scrolling social media. Perhaps you begin experimenting with limiting your time. Other areas where you might start setting some boundaries is in your personal or professional relationships, certain spaces or environments. This could be either an in-person or virtual space. Or look at how you feel about different activities. Now, of course, there are always going to be those things we don't enjoy, but that do contribute to our long-term well-being. There are aspects to running my business that are not as fun as the actual part where I get to guide practices, finances, marketing, and so much of the back end work of keeping a brand alive can feel like a chore. But in the long term, these actions help build and maintain the well-being of my business. The same as doing household chores maintains the well-being of both our home and our own mental states. As a final prompt for this journaling exercise, take one of your values and plug it into this sentence. I show that I value, name the value. Let's actually go back to the boundaries. So let's pause, pause the webinar here and journal on that boundary prompt. What is one area where you can set or adjust boundaries? And again, about 2 to 3 minutes to journal on this prompt. Pause the webinar here. And now, as our final journaling exercise, let's take one of your values and plug it into this sentence. I show that I value, name the value, by, name the action connected to that value. Or you can flip it and write, this action reveals that I value, and then name the value. So name that action and what value it reveals. And again, pause the webinar here for about 2 minutes to uh, journal on these prompts. And welcome back. Self-inquiry work is not easy, but taking the time to journal about our inner world can help us gain more perspective and be more intentional with our time, energy, and resources. Pause here. We're going to continue that journaling momentum and take about 5 to 10 minutes to journal about the emotions you feel around your intrinsic value and worth, boundaries, and values alignment. We'll refer back to our emotions wheel from our first session and emotional landscape descriptions. So you can write down again what emotions are arriving as you consider your intrinsic value and worth, boundaries, and values. And again, 5 to 10 minutes here. You can pause the webinar here. Let's meditate. Scan the QR code or visit the website to connect to this loving kindness meditation. I believe the more loving we can be to ourselves and others, the more free we can be from judging others and being ourselves. After this meditation, I recommend taking a long break, perhaps enjoying a sleep and returning to this webinar the next day, or just taking a longer few hour break, maybe a afternoon walk, dinner break, and then coming back to session 3. Thank you again so much for practicing with me.